Page 91, he talks about the Australian government's Board of Inquiry, and I note that I went through with him in some detail, you and Cameron being involved in this, and I'll talk about the significance of that, about the prosecutor Dax, and the fact that it was really a kangaroo court. Ironically, this really sort of, I don't know, not juvenile, what's a better word? It's like, the guy's just like, he's a terrible writer, but the guy wrote this book called Fair Game, Steve Kinane out of Australia. As much as the guy, Kinane, tried to just pile on, because he's playing the pile-on game now, because it's easy to go after Scientology and all that business, and so he's just regurgitating these things that have been said on. But even Kinane, who wasn't trying to come to this conclusion, the description that he gave to the Australian inquiry and that whole episode, which he went in some depth because his book's in Australia, describes a kangaroo court and a witch hunt to the T. Of course, none of that's described in here. He says they came out with a quote-unquote passionate condemnation of Scientology. But I went through a lot of those factors that Kinane actually reported on, even though Kinane, I never talked to him about any of that. And had I, he would have heard what I told Wright. But we'll get there when he re-brings this up, because he's doing this jumbled timeline. Wright says in the same paragraph where he introduces the Australian inquiry that Hubbard believed that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, along with the FBI and CIA, were feeding slanderous information about the church to various governments. Now, all of a sudden, that's been devalued to a belief, which can be written off to his delusions and hallucinatory, and paranoid mind frame that he's accused him of 50 times already, and we're only at page 91. And yet I went through this a lot with Wright about how he didn't believe it. It's documented. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FBI, and the CIA were feeding slanderous information about the church to various governments. But Wright just dismissed, so he doesn't tell that story that I told him. Instead, he says Hubbard believed, as if this is a paranoid delusion. You get what I'm saying? This is doubly kind of dishonest too, because, and I don't know if Wright in here does it, but the whole anti-Scientology narrative goes into this whole thing about, well, they bought the IRS off or intimidated the IRS. And it was so bizarre. The IRS agreed to, I think they highlighted it in the film where Dave Miscavige says the IRS is going to send out this correction material to all these places that got their bad information, right? It's not that they were intimidated or forced or bought off to do it. It's that the statement that he says is a belief of Hubbard's is documented true. U.S. agencies were sending slanderous material and did it for 4 decades. And it was so patently clear by the documentation presented to the higher levels of the IRS. That's why they agreed to send corrective material out. That's how much of a not belief or a paranoid delusion it was. It was for real. And Wright knew that in spades.